We're all here. I'm calling. Call the meeting to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Conlon?
Here.
Neely?
Here.
Terzinski? Parch?
Here.
Parker? Peddle?
Here.
We have a quorum.
And we will have a quorum until I understand Mr. Conlon has to leave early.
Well, not till about 7.
Right, correct. So there is no public unless the chief would like to participate.
I will be here in spirit and voice as needed if you call upon me, good sir.
Okay. Lynn, we just got the public participation. Do you have any desire to address? Well, we do it ahead of time. So,
No,
do you have any?
that's fine.
Okay. I'll try if time allows to allow another opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting. So.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. So our first note is approval of the minutes of September 21st meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Moment. I have something I want to ask about. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, we have to, on the minutes? Yeah, we have to have a motion on the floor. Then you can ask.
Okay.
I'll move.
Okay.
Second.
And a second. Okay, Lynn?
I just was trying to read them to make sure I was up on what you guys did last time. I'm sorry for the video. And I noticed something that it may have been an autocorrect thing. I think I read this. On page 5, it's on the lower half of the page and it's near the end of a line. It says communicates, and I was wondering if it's communicates or communities. Does anybody have a copy of them?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to pull them up. Just a second.
I don't think I was hallucinating.
Communities.
I agree.
Okay, right. Okay, we'll make that change. Any other additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a, well, let's see, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So then our goal tonight is to get completely through item number 5 and as far into the discussion of item number 6 as we can. With that said, we will likely skip, once we've got the discussion done with item number 5, we will skip to item number 7 to do the recommendation on the property tax levy, assuming that we can get to that particular point. Our number 1 goal tonight is a comprehensive discussion of the options we have with respect to property tax levy. I will make a couple of comments to frame the issue. I will not express my opinion until the rest of the committee has had a chance to speak. But I will frame based upon the materials that were distributed. Since, if I'm remembering right, you were not here, Ron, is that correct?
I was here.
You were here. Okay, then Lynn was here.
here.
Okay. So I apologize, Ron. And what I want to set up is the discussion that we need to have. We had a presentation last meeting from the actuaries with respect to the pensions and the situation with respect to fire and police pensions. And one of the issues that was discussed was that there was an assumption of 7.5% return and a 7.5% discount rate as a result of that. That was felt to be too high. Okay. And the actuaries recommended that we reduce that in order to more realistically reflect our pension obligations. remember that the lion's share of our pension obligations right now are going to catching up with underfunding of the pensions in the past years, either because of changes in the market or affirmative decisions by the city. Right now, if we did nothing but pay the annual pension liability, the new liability that's created by the work of the year, okay, we owe $53 million in, well, I think that was only one of the pensions. We owe millions and millions and millions of dollars that even if we eliminated the police and fire department overnight, we would still have to pay them. Okay? So the issue with respect to the property tax levy is how aggressive we can be with respect to paying down the liability that we have. There's no question we're going to have to pay all of this money. Second of all, the financial policies of the city, which were passed through the Finance Advisory Committee, call for the property tax levy to cover 100% of all the pension liabilities each year. Right now, we are not covering any of the Social Security, and we are only covering a small portion, if any, in a given year, of the IMRF obligation. So the recommendations that are options 1, 2, and 3 do not include, as I read it, they do not include the additional liability for IMRF and for Social Security. With that, we have 3 options before us. One is to keep the discount rate at 7.5%. One is to reduce it to 7.25%. And one is to reduce the discount rate to 7%. And there are corresponding tables in the backup as to what those changes would mean with respect to the levy, and if we kept the discount rate at 7.5%, only considering police and fire, if we did nothing, we would still need to increase the levy by $372,000. 7.25 would be $659,000, and 7% would be increasing the levy by $957,660, which, if I'm calculating that, it would be an increase of, go back here, sorry. So it would be $957,660 more than the $5.5 million that we had before. So roughly, it's going to be 1/5, roughly a 20% increase in the levy. Does that sound correct, staff? Okay. All right. With that, I will open it up to the committee for discussion. And why don't we just go around unless somebody wants to volunteer to go first. We're going to hear from everybody.
What did you say the amount was for 7.5? I know it's 659 for 7.25%.
Correct.
What was it for?
That's the increase.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
those who are looking, if you look at what is page 12 of the memo, if you want to see the three options in one location under on page 12 of the memo, you'll see the options, option 1, 2, and 3, so you can compare the differential and the dollar amounts, if that helps.
And we're just talking about the changing the discount rate part, is that correct?
Actually, if you just want to look at police and fire pension on page
Yeah.
3. So this first part.
That's where I'm looking on page 3.
Yeah. So the overall option, the number's a little bit different because of how the other levies factor into it, but it's not very much. This is the bulk of your change. And so the first one at the top here shows you the 2016 extended levy, what is recommended by the actuaries for 2017 levy at the 7.5, what the difference is. Then we go to 2 1/4, what the difference is there from the 7.5, but then what the cumulative total will be, and then it repeats again for the 7.
Chairman?
Dave?
I think the point you made about this has to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
It's an obligation. The dollars are committed. We have to pay these pensions, and there really isn't a choice but to do it. It seemed like the actuaries had a pretty good updated job done on life expectancy and all of the math there. The one that just seemed to be off was the assumed rate of return on the investments. And that's the one that we're just kidding ourselves to use that, especially looking at the portfolio mix that these pension funds have to have. They have to have some fixed income, which we all know interest rates are very, very low. Bond yields are low. And so with that mix of investment, it seemed like 7% was the right number to use. Which I don't want to, I'm paying taxes in town too, so I'm going to feel this like everybody. But it seems like if we don't pay it right as we go, if it was a defined contribution plan, you'd pay the right amount and move on. So that's kind of where my head's at, is that I think we need to pay the right amount. It might be more proper for council to decide to do it in a couple years of stages, to 7 1/4 and then 7, but I think we need to be aware that the math of the market is such. Now, this year might get people lulled into thinking we got a strong market, and we do have the stock market hit a new high today.
But we're not loaded up in equities to generate these funds.
Well, there's a good portion of it. Between the two, pension and fire have a slightly different mix, but both have, at least 2/3 were in equities. But to forecast, I think as we talked about last time, this is a 20-year forecast ahead, I think was the idea. So using a 7% blended rate of return looks like that's what the actuaries are telling us is the right number.
Well, and as it stands now, I think it's 2040, or did they change it
The state law is you have to find 90%
by 2000?
by 2040.
Right.
So
So
we're targeting 100%.
Right.
basically.
essentially, okay, what we're saying, 20 years is not that long a time in budgeting, in budgeting terms. So what we're saying is that $53 million, okay, needs to be paid off or caught up over the next 20 years. And anything that you don't pay this year, you're going to incur interest on that amount, and you will owe more next year when it feeds into the equation, even though they amortize. If you're making the choice not to fully fund. Okay. So anyway, I'm trying not to steer the discussion.
I think that's right. We'll have less money earning.
Correct.
Which is what we have that opportunity cost that we just won't have enough money in there earning, and therefore we'll have to increase more principal in future years. So,
Yeah, that's another reason.
and
So the 7.5% is more appealing to Moody's than it is to reality. Is that what we're?
No,
It's the
actually,
opposite.
it's the opposite.
How
They
We've
want to
got
be
Moody's
conservative.
concerned. with where we're at. And I agree, the 7.5%, she all but said it, that it's not the recommended, you know what I mean, we're overly optimistic with that. So whether they can do that, like you say, immediately or in stages is probably going to be, the reality is whatever we do, the city council is going to be recommended to the city council, and they're going to, you know, be the final decider of this and what is most palatable to the voters. Because none of this, you're right, we're going to pay it one way or the other, but it's not going to sit well here. You know what I mean? But what do you do?
No, never, oh, sorry. It's pay me now or pay me later. We owe the money. It is an obligation. It can't be dodged. I know both of us are acutely aware about the state of Illinois has even lowered their expected rate of return on their pension lines. And it was 7.5, wasn't it? It's down.
No, it was, at one point it was. Last year it was 6.75 and they went to 6.5 as of July 1.
But it's, well, it's certainly not 7.5.
Just another thought on the pensions too is we've reached the stage, just looking back at annual reports for several years, where we're starting to have more, not in police yet, but in fire, where now we have more who are receiving benefits from the pension than are active. And I expect that will grow. So I think the actuaries put that all into the plan, that part of this growth is life expectancy is longer, health is better. So we're going to be paying these for more years than we would have thought about 20 years ago or 40 years ago. Again, the sooner we pay what we need to pay.
Lynn?
Well, I was also looking at what Tom has written here. And
yeah, I should say, go ahead and read, no, go ahead and read what Tom said.
Tom sent an email, and his comments on the pension assumption, his comment on the pension assumption is, I suppose moving our return percentage down to 7.25%, I support moving our return percentage down to 7.25%, but would not support the total increase being recommended at $659K. I would support only the option $1 increase of $382K, with the balance to come from cost reductions in operations of $287K, which is a $1 increase associated with a decrease in the return to 7.25%.
Okay, go ahead.
I think we should go down to 7.25%, and I would like to recommend that we go ahead and telling people just to bite that bullet, that $659K, because those pensions aren't going to go away, and the problem is going to get increasingly worse the longer you delay doing something about it. The longer we delay doing something about it. We as a community.
I think there's a few things. First of all, I do not support trying to play games with, yeah, we'll do the 7.25%, but we won't increase property taxes by that amount. Or we cannot cut our way to prosperity. We need to put this into perspective, okay? And one of the things that we struggled with last year, and it's up again this year, but even more compelling, is the fact that right now we've got this outstanding pension liability or pension shortfall of millions and millions and millions of dollars. Actuarially, what we need to do to pay the correct share this year, to pay 100% just of police and fire, is to levy $6.45 million, which is an increase of $958,000, okay? But you can't forget, okay? We've also got the next item on the agenda, okay? And this is something that other communities have faced, and there's actually, I went to a conference last week where there was a whole session on people not paying for their streets and their infrastructure and being caught short. Here's the situation we're in, okay? So if we levy $6.45 million, which is option 3, okay, we've still got to come up with another $1 million plus or minus for IMRF and for Social Security. We also need, and I will use that term vehemently, we need to have some way of paying approximately $6 to $7 million a year in fleet replacement and in streets. And we've pushed that can down the road several times.
For 20 years.
Yeah. And one of the other things that there is a silver lining. The silver lining to paying option 3, or putting things onto the property tax with respect to meeting the financial policy of full funding of pension liabilities through, or full funding of the actuarial pension liabilities through the property tax. With respect to, I don't want to shift too quickly here. So you've got this pension, okay, and that's going to be one of the things that is weighing on the city's finances. Okay? The more you can do to pay that liability as actuarially determined, the less you're going to have to do it out of other parts of the budget. And second of all, there's no way we're going to come up with $6 or $7 million in additional revenue, or we can't cut $6 to $7 million out of the budget. So what is the most likely thing to happen? Well, as was presented last week at our meeting, the most likely thing to happen with respect to streets and vehicle replacement is that there will be some kind of bond, that we will have to have some kind of dedicated source to be able to pay for that bond. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you're going to have a bond, then the bond rating is going to be very important. What's the number one drain on the city right now in terms of payment? Well, the number one drain, in my opinion, is pensions. And if we aggressively look at pensions and meet the policy that was passed with respect to what the property tax levy is supposed to pay for, I think that it is not unreasonable that within a relatively short period of time, we may be able to prop the bond rating up maybe 1 notch or 2 notches.
That's a good point.
Which is then going to save us money when we have to go find this $6 or $7 million, and it's not running a budget surplus. What it is doing is trying to be responsible in ways that the bonding agencies are going to notice. So I support option 3, and there's another reason I support option 3. The other reason that I support option 3 is that when we publish the truth in taxation notice, you can always go down from what you publish. But I think that we need to indicate to the city council, my opinion only, that we need to indicate to the city council that there has to be a serious consideration given to meeting the policy and also meeting their fiduciary responsibility to the city. There is a very sacred responsibility to the taxpayers. But along with that, when you are an elected official on a board, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the financial integrity of the institution, the government. And in this case, remember that what we're paying for is not things that are subject to current decisions by the city council. We have a shortfall of millions of dollars of unfunded pension liability that at some point we have to get off the books. You know, that may be 20 years from now, but you know, with the amount that we're talking about, we're going to have to start attacking that that deficit. And in addition to that, we are going to have to take into account the fact that if the 7.5% return assumption is not an accurate one, or 7.25%, which is even relatively high.
Yeah, it is.
All it does is it comes back to haunt you because you don't meet that return on your portfolio, and so your unfunded liability grows. So I think there's a lot of reasons for me to support option number 3.
If you don't pay your FICA and you're in a regular business, they put you in jail. You know, I keep thinking about that.
I keep thinking about that with the state. Yeah.
They put you in the pen, not just jail.
Well, do we want to try a motion? Does somebody have a motion that they would like to present?
We're to recommend something for council?
Yeah, to recommend one of the options.
Can I add an update?
Sure.
So, you know, we did get our equalized assessed valuation figures from the county today.
Oh.
And so my assumption from the memo was a 3.9% growth in taxable property, and it came out to be 5.2%.
Okay.
So some of that growth, 42%
We'll help.
of it is new
That
construction.
will help.
So it helps lower the burden on existing.
Yeah.
So that is also, I think, will help in your thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, I think-
So what that will affect is the effect on the individual home.
That was a graph that was very helpful in the materials that we have here, the EAV, how much that's dropped.
Yeah, the graph, we want to see it over time.
We've got to get that EAV up. We've got to grow out of this issue.
And Molly's got a slide that you can show.
This is good, and it's not unexpected because they do a 3-year rolling average, and so
That's right.
So what we're doing is we're dropping like 2014 off and putting 2016 in, or something to that effect.
You can see we're
So,
starting
One
to
rolling
take kind of rebound here
yeah.
and new growth. So you haven't returned to pre-recession, you know, but you are starting to come back up in our taxable property base for the city.
Something that might be some comfort to the property owners around town, and this has really bothered me, that big dip, and you know, you read in the newspapers and in magazines about, oh, this market's hot, that market's hot, prices have increased 100%, yada, yada, yada. That's only happened in a very, very few municipal areas in the United States. Most of the United States is looking at this same pattern we've got. So it's not like we're duds or we've been left behind. We're actually quite representative of the trend in property valuations across the U.S. There's only been a few of those markets that have climbed.
Yeah, over the last 6 months, sales prices here have gone up.
Yes, but I'm talking about like you ought to look at.
Oh, no. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that that everybody else had this dip,
Had this dip, but they're coming back
and it's
up.
starting
They're
to
coming
come
back.
back. Yeah.
Gently.
Yeah.
Yeah, the concern is real estate, I think, or I'm sorry, commercial. I think that's going to be the next bubble, the overbuilding of commercial real estate. We rank just above
Which we?
10.
Which we?
We've overbuilt.
Are you talking about the U.S.?
I'm talking about the United States, I'm talking about Illinois. Go down 23 and look at buildings that were built 5 to 10 years that have never had occupancy in them. And I just think that's neither here nor there. It's my
Well, we're not having to worry about that in DeKalb.
speculative. Well, I think we will if we're talking about taxes paid, and I think we do have to worry about it in DeKalb. I think that we've got too much commercial.
Oh, are you talking
the same
about
thing?
retail going bust or something?
Confused, yeah. Have you seen all the empty business? Go
Yes.
to Fitworks and look at all the empty stores in there that are unfilled. And
Well, one of the ones that like it or not, it's a factual statement. The outlots at Northland Plaza have not filled, but that was a very quirky thing. I didn't like it, and it's one of the reasons why.
you know about those outlying, that's what I'm talking about, those outlying
Right.
buildings that got
Okay.
near.
That was deliberate.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they were told that as a condition of their loan, I think it was not the city's approval,
Right.
that they had to build out those outlots.
The developer had to do this?
Yeah, they had.
Oh, really?
They
I
had
didn't know
built.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's my understanding is that there was a condition that they actually had to have so many square footage available, even though a lot of it was spec. At least this is the way that I remember it. And if you remember, there was a Red Lobster out there.
Yes.
Okay, the Red Lobster was a casualty of that, and many people may know they actually literally moved. Well, literally, they moved that Red Lobster franchise
St.
to
Charles.
Geneva.
I thought it was St. Charles, but yeah,
Well,
South East, yeah.
right. And the reason was that they increased the rent so much because it was going to be under this outlot kind of thing, and
They left.
yeah. So they were vacant when they were built. They were overbuilt, and
Yeah.
Now I will say though, if you look at some of the other developments out there, Pappas put it. That was Pappas development where Elwood
Elwood
Fish
Steakhouse, yeah.
That's full up or pretty
That's
darn
doing
close.
fine, yeah. The
If not,
apartments.
the next one on the old county home property has
Yes.
turned over, and there's
Yes.
businesses in there. So I think there's more positive signs. I mean, the fact that I was kind of worried whether they'd be able to turn over the Ruby Tuesday property.
But they did.
I was kind of
And they did, yeah.
I was kind of worried about whether the KFC Long John Silver's would
Yeah.
turn over, and both of those have
Yeah.
Filled up, boom.
brought businesses that at least a subset of the community would find to be favorable additions to the community, and our restaurant and bar, that's what I call it, the restaurant and bar revenues.
Yep.
That's been one of the few things that has not seen much of a dent. They've continued to be relatively strong. So.
I have a theory on that. It's coming from another university town through the recession. The food and beverage there never decreased until it snowed every weekend in December.
Yeah.
So it was, I think, a driving factor of that type of revenue is you have college students who are willing to go out and eat and, go to restaurants and fast food more often, and they have more of a disposable budget for those type of.
Well, and Sycamore Road is on the bus line. And
Yes.
so that helps a bit, as is most of West Lincoln Highway. So that's been
And
okay.
Glidden, I see students all the time at Schnucks,
Yes.
so they're out there, I see them all the time, and Taylor, the buses, I mean.
Right. Okay, back to our
You put it
text.
very well, because I thought about this today. I'm looking, as I get confused on some of the mechanics with Moody's and the bond, I would agree though, that doing this, we have to look at what's best for the city. We can't, I could put my citizen hat on, and I would be with you, Mike, as far as that.
Well,
7%,
Will you make a motion?
I will make a motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Something else. We promised all these people something. They're going to be looking for it one of these days.
I'm listening.
Those pensions.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that
You heard.
I think that hard decisions need to be made, and we're recommending that a hard decision be made.
Right.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Or actually, I think we need to call the roll.
No,
Go ahead.
wait a minute, is the motion on the floor for the 7%
7%.
option 3?
Yes. Option 3.
And we can recommend it and they can
They can,
do what they want to with it and they will.
And will.
they likely will, but I think our advice is that.
Yes, it's sound financial. I mean, that's our job, so.
Right.
I would wish we had a defined contribution system, something we didn't have to spend all this time and money to become actuaries. And I wish we had different deals in the past, but
We got
this
what we
is
got.
this is the
Correct.
game, and until the
And-
legislature changes it,
And police and fire contribute more in contributions than any other pension system. They're 9, 10, 11%, depending on the year.
Yeah, you know.
9.91.
Yeah.
They also do not, in the downstate police pension, participate in Social Security. So
Right.
many police officers are not eligible for Social Security at the time of retirement.
Correct. Correct. Okay, vote your conscience, but we're making a recommendation to the city council. And
And my goodness, as you said, it's our own policy that
we've
property
not-
taxes are supposed to carry these things.
And we're still $1 million short even with
I
option 3.
know.
Yeah.
All those, actually call the roll, please.
Conlon,
yes.
Neely,
Yes.
Terzitsky, absent. Parch,
Yes.
Parker, absent. Petal,
Yes.
4 yeses.
Okay. Then let's go ahead and move on to our next item, which is item number 6, the 5-year financial plan. I think I'm going to actually ask staff about this one. What are the things that you most need guidance, advice to the council about?
I'll jump in with issue number 1, then turn it over to Jeff and Molly. I think you see it under committee recommendation. As part of the analysis, what we did is we've been comprehensively looking through the various long-range agreements that the city has. So we reviewed those with the county, and one of them is the intergovernmental agreement that we have with the DeKalb County on the Peace Road interchange agreement. And if you look at and analyze how much the city has paid, and Jeff can go into more specifics, if the city were to have gone out and either gone out for a traditional bond, we would have fulfilled that amount already at this point. And if we do not end the agreement one way way or the other, that if we continue this through year 2033, on a base amount that they gave us of what was it, $2.3 million, we're going to end up giving the county $7.8 million. So one of the key things I think coming out of the plan that we'd love to have you discuss tonight is whether you would make a recommendation to the council for us to approach the county, and really it should be a simple amendment to the intergovernmental agreement for the county recognizing that we've satisfied that amount, if you look at it from a conventional bond, of the principal plus the interest, and then be able to utilize that revenue. And our recommendation is that we need that to support the general fund.
Yes.
But that would be the key thing. Jeff is here tonight, and we wanted to make sure this was on the agenda because Jeff is with us through tomorrow. So if there's particular questions that you have on the 5-year financial plan or anything else, Jeff, that you want to bring up, but if there's one key thing, we'd love to.
Let's start with that then, please.
You know, and Anne Marie summarized most of it. There was a section in the 5-year plan that actually had a comparison if we had done either a 10-year loan or a 12-year loan. And I believe I can't remember if I used 3 or 4%. I got to find the pages myself. But had a table in there that we had basically already met that obligation. So that's really it's pretty simple as far as that goes. It would at least generate about $250,000 for the city.
Right.
If you recall that, that would be nice to have for operations or for our operations.
That would help.
And obviously, you saw where in some of the information that Molly put together, we still don't levy for pensions. So if we use it for operations, it's kind of going into that same pot that's going to be helping toward IMRF and FICA that we don't, so it's going to help the taxpayer by all means. So we could get into more minutia on that, but that's pretty much the thumbnail.
What do you need? Just an endorsement of that?
Right, we'd love to have a recommendation from the committee that to really
Close it.
To close it. And
I recommend that we stop this thing, that you go tell them.
Is there any reason that it didn't automatically end in the language of the agreement? Is there any reason that it could be continuing? Or maybe I'm missing something. I kind of was surprised.
I give you my perspective on it. The intergovernmental agreements that the city of DeKalb has with DeKalb County are basically open-ended 40-year agreements, so that we're providing this revenue for these different entities over that period of time. And so this is one where it was very specific to the Peace Road interchange. There was no closure on it saying that when the city fulfilled X amount, if you figured what the base and the principal and the interest would have been, that requirement would have been satisfied. So we went back, so as part of this process, Jeff analyzed it. If we were negotiating that agreement today, I would recommend a provision would have been in there to say that. But back in when this agreement was agreed to, there was no terminating provision. There's two ways that, number one, the city could terminate it, unilaterally terminate it, by eliminating the sales tax, that portion that was levied to cover this amount. I think there was 0.25%, but technically if we wanted to do that, we could take it to council. But I think a way to do this is really to approach the county, showing them that our amount, that thank them very much. They helped the city out of a very difficult situation in the past, and our obligations that we had for that interchange. Thank them very much for how they helped us out, but we've satisfied the amount of what they benefited us.
I'm not recommending this, okay?
Okay.
But there is a very palatable way to approach this. The $150,000 that we have in the budget for the social service agencies was a cut. It was cut down to $150,000. So, and that benefits those benefits flow outside the borders of the city of DeKalb to a great extent. So if a portion of that money that would otherwise be going to the county was earmarked in quotes for doing something that would benefit the county, not as a jurisdiction, but the county citizens, that might be a win-win.
Okay. Can I give you a little background? So what you may look at just the $150,000 that the city provides through the various grants for funding for these organizations. There's other ways. We have also supported social service organizations, and I'm not sure if we really have gotten into this with the committee. We've talked about this at the council level. We also provide $60,000 a year in grants through CDBG funding. In fact, those agreements are on the council's agenda for Monday. So if you want to be able to look on that, you can see the specifics for that. We also provide additional funding through subsidies, and there was a memo where former finance director Kathy Haley calculated this at one point in time. The value was somewhere in the range, I think, between $300,000 and $400,000 when you look at all the things that we do for social services. So as an example, the community center that's across the street from City Hall, we provide that building at no cost to the entities that are in there, including, I mean, we're talking no cost, there's no rent. We provide all the operations, electricity, everything with that. We're actually going to be making some modifications to that building because we're the owner. So when you calculate all the benefit to social services, it's really in the range of somewhere between $350,000 to $400,000.
It's probably even more than that. I mean, I didn't mean to. First of all, I didn't mean to open this into a full discussion of the social services portion of the budget. But that social services, that $150,000 is just cash being provided to a very limited number of agencies that do particular things, and it is fair that the city supports that more. My only point here was that there is an issue of political palatability, and so to some extent, I think that the city, in doing this, will need to make the perception match up with palatability in the community. Either the way Jeff talked about, helping make up for pensions, but it's going to be more palatable if you can show that the benefits of what we'll do with the money in operations are things that are going to flow beyond the borders of the community. I mean, there's a lot of things, and gosh, I know that it's going to be misinterpreted because these are going to be specific examples, but the airport benefits the whole county.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's those types of things that you say, okay, yeah, we're.
I'll give you one particular example we were discussing this afternoon, and I don't know how much the committee's aware of this, but through DSATs, we've been taking the lead on talking about the merger of the NIU bus, Husky bus line with BAC. And ultimately, the city of DeKalb would be responsible for that transit. And so that's going to have a regional benefit, but that is going, and we were spending this afternoon trying to understand the staff time, the staff members that are already involved to make that reality happen. And why is that important is because by merging these two bus lines that have been independent, we're going to be able to leverage that merger to get additional federal funds. So we're going to be flowing more money into the county in excess of $1 million next year alone. And it's going to be city staff that is going to be administering and making that transit happen that is going to have a county benefit.
And VAC is one of the people that receives a portion of the $150,000.
Very much so.
Right.
So, okay.
May I make a motion?
Yes, you may.
I make a motion that, let's see, that you make, thank you very much, that you of course, very skillfully approach the negotiations so that you would close the Peace Road interchange agreement that is currently standing as an intergovernmental agreement with the county. That's sloppy, but that's it, okay?
So we recommend that the staff negotiate closure of the Peace Road interchange agreement.
Right.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Call the roll.
Conlon,
Yes.
Neely,
Yes.
Kierzynski's absent. Parch,
Yes.
Parker absent. Peddle.
Here. Here. Yes. I'm not voting present. I'm not voting present.
Four yes.
Okay. Next, what do you think? Take up the streets and fleet funding?
Actually, yeah, on the plan, we can talk about whatever the committee desires. Our goal is to get feedback from the committee on the plan, and if you want to get into streets, I know that Tim Holman, our Public Works Director, was going to be heading over here, but there's another meeting happening that he's at right now over at City Hall, which is the Environmental Commission, which is why he's not here. And I'm going to look at either Jeff or Molly if you think there's particular items on the plan, or Sharon Peddle if there's particular items you want to review.
Thank you for photocopying these. Or wait a minute, I brought that. Never mind. Thank you. Excuse me.
Now, in fairness, let me pull up because I don't want to misrepresent just a moment here.
And may I ask a question while you're doing that?
Sure.
I may not have read this carefully enough. I was reading through all the different options, and thank you for whoever relayed the thing about that graph is over there on page whatever it was, and yada, yada, yada. Thank you. Did I understand that part of the ideas that were being put forward were to do a combination of these, or perhaps them all as a group, or did I imagine that, or the option 1, 2, 3, and 4
on the streets funding? Yeah, I mean they were all presented as 4 different separate options.
Right.
And it was also explained of what with certain they still fell short.
Right.
And of course the bonding would help fund it over that period of time. But
I think what was making me ask this now, it's come back to me. I knew something that was puzzling me. When I was looking at the graphs, thank you for directing me in the right place, I was seeing here, I understand about total capital project needs, got that. Existing funding sources, got that. Bond proceeds, got that, I think. But then proposed new revenues, I didn't know if that were an amalgamation of all these things done together or what on the graph. I'm confused a little bit.
Which specific graph are you looking at?
Well, actually, let's talk about that graph that's on page 136. It says propose this one, this pretty one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then let me go to that.
This one.
Yeah. That was the different proposals.
Well, the thing about it was, there.
I'm sorry.
It was my understanding it was pick and choose. We could go with all 4 of them. We could.
Yeah, but this graph is.
One by themselves will not do it.
My understanding was that that's simply a graph saying, in order to implement the capital plan, this is how much revenue from someplace that you're going to need.
From some unknown
right.
place.
And then they have some options of possibilities, which really were just brainstorms.
Okay, well these things generate vastly different amounts of money.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Is that what we had tentatively on the agenda for next meeting on October 17th is to go into more detail on the plan with Tim here.
Right. I think that makes
So you have another week to really review.
Good.
So what might be beneficial for us on the overall 5-year financial plan, if you look at the 5-year financial plan as the umbrella document, and asset management dealing with streets and fleet is a part of it. So we'll deal with that at the next meeting. But if you look at the umbrella plan, what do you think of it? What do you want to see in addition? We're going to look at this as our foundation moving forward, that we are going to add more information, bring it back to the FAC.
Okay,
What we're
great.
looking at,
Great.
what's missing? What is not in there that you want to see? Is there additional analysis of a particular area? We know at the last meeting, one of the committee members, we talked about adding the town of Normal for the data on the university towns, which we will do that for the next go-around. Is there anything that's missing that you want us to see us do in addition to what we've already done?
Okay. Well, one of the things that actually, you know, I had asked Molly about, which I think would be very useful, and maybe we can ask the actuaries to check our work. But we've got this gap, this unfunded liability.
Which one?
The unfunded pension liability.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, what I would like to see, as soon as we can, and that's an open-ended comment, but I would like to see an amortization of essentially shutting down the city and showing how much would still have to be levied in property taxes just to meet that
All the
that
pension
amount.
obligations. And
The
what else?
accumulated
Yeah,
pension
yeah,
obligations,
yeah,
so everything but the
yeah.
normal costs.
Yeah.
And it's a substantial amount, because I
Yes,
think
it is.
it's very important when we're talking about the levy that this is not something that can be affirmatively solved by any personnel decisions made now.
It's already obligated.
Right, I mean, the lion's share is, I mean, there is a small amount, but the lion's share is already obligated. And if you include, you know, some of the other things that are not funded in there, you know, that's huge. The other thing that I think is also important, and forgive me if this is already in the 5-year financial plan. I don't remember seeing it. Okay. But there is a counterbalance to the pension costs. And that is that our OPEB, our other post-employment benefits, should be dropping because of the changes that were made
A few years ago.
in the healthcare for dependents and the like. And if we could see, and this may be the next time that the 5-year plan is done, but if we could see that counterbalance where there would actually be more discretionary revenues to use for operating expenses as a result of not having as high a responsibility for OPEB, that would be very helpful. And there's two components to that. One component is the fact that we changed city policy, or we we enforced city policy. It had been there since 1993, but we hadn't enforced the policies that were in all the contract. And the second thing is that you've got a higher proportion of employees that will be Medicare eligible. And although it's not as huge a difference as one would expect, there will be a difference in liability for for medical care, even if people are not eligible for Social Security. There's been changes in the law that make the people eligible. Chief, your officers pay Medicare, but not Social Security, correct? So that's the same for university employees. So that's something that gradually, over time, is going to reduce our liability.
For clarification, you had mentioned enforced city policy, which, just so for our benefit, which policies were we enforcing now that we hadn't in the past?
Oh no! What the deal was, Jeff, is that when there was a big controversy about the city wanting contributions from employees at a higher rate for their dependents and for survivors. And it turned out that there were numbers, I think it was 1993, there were numbers in the ordinance, and it said right in the ordinance that these numbers would be adjusted as to increasing the contribution over time. And it turned out that this clause was in every union contract that had occurred since then. So it was just a case of putting in the new numbers, and that increased employee contributions for those dependents. And beyond any changes in eligibility post-employment, there were some changes just in terms of following what was in the contract about the employee's share of health insurance.
So if I could just add to build on your comments, just a couple observations as working on the 5-year plan and actually putting together the fiscal year 18 budget and comparing previous fiscal years. So 2 things. One, long term that's in the plan is that you will see that the city has been increasing our reliance on part-time employees, and that there has been a fundamental change over the last number of years, and part of that is recognizing the pension costs and how much that burdens or that causes an issue in order to be able to provide services. So
there was one chart that you had that was on the left-hand side of the page that was over a number of years that was very helpful because it was like ETF, FTEs, FTEs over a number of years, so you could really see how it had changed. That was very helpful.
And in regards to that too, I mean, not only have we looked at when we fill a position, is there an opportunity to fill it in a part-time way instead of a full-time way, but I think you've also seen that the city is contracting out services more. So outsourcing. Yeah. So as an example, crossing guard services, that's one of the fundamental shifts that you'll see in the budget. This will be the last year. We previously had 19 part-time crossing guards. We contracted it out this school year. By next school year, we'll be transitioning it to the school district. So you're seeing this fundamental shift in outsourcing or trying to minimize those costs, or at least that's our hope. So that's one comment. The other comment I wanted to bring up, and I've asked Molly to take a look at this and be able to analyze this and provide this to you at a future point in time. Our pension obligations are consuming a larger portion of our budget. In particular, knowing that police and fire are the 2 largest departments and the biggest portion of our general fund budget, and aptly so, as they should be in every community, is police and fire. Fire are the 2 largest. Public Works is the 3rd. That's why they call them the big 3. Those 3 departments are over 75% of our general fund budget. But if you look at, when you get, as we're trying to finish up the fiscal year 18 budget, when you get it, look at, one of the things I found interesting is looking at the previous fiscal year's data as to what was the ratio of the base salaries to the pensions. And so that ratio is now decreasing or increasing. There was a greater gap between where the salaries were at in police versus the pensions, and the pensions are getting larger and closer to the base salaries. So it's just, that's the cost of doing business in a municipality, and that's the challenge that we're facing in relation to pensions. And so this is an issue that is going to get larger every year, and we're seeing it just in the last couple of years with the update of the last budgets.
But if you follow actuarial funding, that should mitigate.
Yeah.
It may not eliminate. And the other thing that will mitigate, God help us, Dave, is if we start getting better market returns, then the asset balance should go up regardless of the amount of employees. And as your asset balance goes up, your funding ratio is going to go up. And so it's very possible that things will, just as they went down, they could eventually go back up, but they haven't been, they've been moving more like this growth in EAV in terms of...
Well, fixed income stuff just tanked.
Yes, absolutely.
But equities have been having a party all year.
Yeah. But there are limits on what these pension plans in the public sector can invest in.
What IML is pushing is going to be the changes of fire, the aggregation, I guess, of fire and police pensions.
You think?
Yeah, the proposed legislation.
Yeah.
Did you want to touch on that at all?
If you want to. I mean,
I think one of you had brought up, that obviously we put in the packet last go around, the 65% limit on equities, and a lot of it's because the funds, each of these smaller funds are so small. But right now, IML is actually pushing legislation to aggregate all of these.
Is that Illinois Municipal League?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you go onto their website, they'll have they're actually pushing 4 different scenarios in legislation. They include just aggregating them all and putting them under IMRF's board. There's also scenarios where they would still have the individual boards, but they'd be managed by IMRF. And then there's a couple of other options, similar. But the thought again is to try to get to that 7.5–8% market return that IMRF always gets. But they're so large, they don't have the restrictions that the smaller pension boards have. But so I think the state legislature might be sympathetic as more and more municipalities tell them this is just taking more and more of our budgets. So if you know your legislator, you might push on tell them to consider it. They haven't been assigned numbers yet. I mean, as far as House bills or Senate bills, but
it's percolating in there someplace.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's the furthest I've seen them yet.
Well, I'll say personally, I'm not going to. I'm worried about the other shoe dropping. You guys would love to see the other shoe drop, but
which other shoe?
The other shoe is that what the governor really wants is that, number one, municipalities be able to declare bankruptcy for the purpose of getting rid of their pension liability, and number two, that that they be able to unilaterally defund their pensions. So as soon as you start playing this game with, oh yeah, our municipalities are under pressure. If you just want to aggregate the assets and create a risk pool, that sounds like a really good idea, so that you're leveraging the larger size. But if you're going to start saying, okay, we're going to start providing relief to municipalities, that's something personally I would have a problem with.
All these seem to be aggregating the assets. Is what it seemed like the model's working.
Well, remember that part of the governor's agenda was exactly what I said. The ones that he's rolled back was, municipal bankruptcy, and the president wants municipal bankruptcy to be allowed too, and state bankruptcy. But yeah.
I would just say from a municipal standpoint, the conversations that I've seen happening are focusing on if that ever were to happen, is taking the police and fire pension funds to use the IMRF model, because the IMRF model has been very successful in Illinois.
It has,
So
yes,
it's
it
not,
has.
from a municipal perspective, it's not to go to that worst case scenario of municipalities filing for bankruptcy, but to be able to coordinate all the assets and not have 650 different pensions
No,
operated separately, but
You actually probably save some money too, because it's
Yeah,
like
you
a single audit.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's a huge uphill battle, because your pension funds that are more fully funded are going to resist the effort, and those that are not are going to want
Right,
to be
exactly.
effective. So,
Going back to the part-time piece, what percentage of your employees are part-time now? I know we've talked about this in the past, but is it going like 5% to 20%?
I would have to look at the numbers, but I can tell you, like, as of today, we have about, 200 full-time and 40
Part-time?
because I think our full-time equivalent is 242.
So the chart
chart
was,
would be-
it said 198 as far as full-time in fiscal 17 and 46. for
So the
part-time.
part-time's gone up.
It was 40 in 08.
We split out.
And it did go up.
And I know this isn't, but here'd be my question on that, not to throw a rain on good news, but I'd be curious if HRP with my supervisors would know this. What's the turnover rate when you have part-timers versus what was full-timers? What's the expense on training these
Yep.
individuals? And I'm asking that because when I worked with the state board, you know, it was very popular for schools to suddenly get rid of janitors and their pesky pensions and contract it out. And what a lot of schools found was that didn't go so well for them, because if you've got somebody in that building and they owned it, using that as an example,
Yeah.
they owned that building and they took pride in it. You have contractors, not that I'm going to denigrate them, but
Yeah.
it didn't go as well, and stuff seemed to break down faster. And that would be my whole thought of that. I remember Jacobson talking about that in one of the city council meetings. I know he's not here, but talking about contracting, and I thought, I'm a little leery of always just that's a quick solution to try and save money or save a buck to hire part-timers, hire, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, we could look at it, I think it
curious.
depends on the position and how it's structured. So as an example, we have some part-time positions that appeal to retirees or those people who are
Yeah.
having encore careers.
Right.
That it fits into their
Sure.
schedule. So it really depends. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head if we see greater or less turnover with the part-timers.
So you might be intentionally hiring people that are looking for solely part-time, not people desperate for a job.
Yeah, Chief?
I would just add, on the police department side, we see very little turnover, period, in
Do you?
full or part-time.
Okay.
And there is healthy turnover with part-time. There are times when we get part-time employees that when vacancies come open for full-time employment, they've already had demonstrated behavior where they perform at a certain level. They've already acquired certain skills.
Okay.
Currently, we have a part-time community service officer opening because we hired the last person who filled that slot as a police officer and is in the academy.
Okay.
So that it's like a healthy attrition.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah, but a very, very good question. We'll have to look into that.
I'm just, I'm going through the report again to make sure that I didn't miss anything.
And if you did, so our goal, and I haven't even yet talked about this with Molly, but our goal is going to be to take this document and revise it based on any input that you have and bring it back, I don't know, 6 months or whatever time. There's a lot of internal discussion we have to have as far as how do we, so like all the work that Jeff did working with our management interns on the benchmarking data. How are we going to do that benchmarking data moving forward? Is 2006 and 2011 going to become the benchmark, and then we're going to keep moving forward on the others?
Oh,
So how are we going to show that data? Are we going to now have four data points, or are we going to have 3? So there's a lot of things that we need to figure out, and after Molly gets settled in, come back.
That's fine. I mean, given, I have some experience with that with the Illinois Policy Survey,
Okay.
where we did opinions over time,
Mhm.
and how you do that, and how you change it the next year. And there are different ways. In some cases, you add a data point and you don't drop the others, depending on how many you have. In other cases, you drop the first one and you add a new one, but it really depends on the variable.
I would think one of the things, whether you know today or we can follow up with Chair Petal, that we'd like to know is when we bring this to you next fiscal year, by what month should we be bringing it to you by? So we got feedback last year, the budget process, that you wanted to have the actuaries come present, you wanted to have a separate meeting on the pensions, you wanted to have the audit. So we knew like those benchmarks of those dates. So whether you know now or you want to think about it and let us know later, but what is the months? Because we'll work backwards from this, and then put this 142-page document together was a huge undertaking. So at least now we have the foundation. It will be a little easier to move forward with.
To that very, oh my goodness, I'm just a mess tonight, sorry. To what you're talking about as far as when to have things in, one thing that is among Tom's comments, the email, unless I've misread something here, is that it seems to me he was wanting to try to get the 5-year plan in prior to when we would be needing to make a levy recommendation. Did I understand him correctly there?
Now, what he's saying is he wants any Tom is under the mistaken opinion that there's going to be a new 5-year strategic plan for this fiscal year, that there's going to be additional forecasts.
Oh.
And what we're doing is we're making suggestions, and this was made clear at the August meeting, that this was a first run through the finance plan, or the strategic financial plan.
Yeah.
And all that Tom was saying there was, he was saying it's the last item here. Tax increases for capital should come after we complete our strategic plan 5-year forecast. Well, it is true that the 5-year plan and forecast need to be taken into consideration as you consider what you're going to do with respect to your capital plans. Now, we've heard it enough that I feel confident that Tom's position is that there should not be any increase in spending that exceeds the growth rate of your core revenues. And so that's what he's talking about with respect to the forecast. So in other words, he's saying that revenues have been growing at about 2%, so that's all the expenditures that we can have is a 2% increase in expenditures. That's his position.
Okay.
And if you go with that methodology, then you're reducing services, because right now, with the rate that the pensions are growing, it's greater than that. The collective bargaining agreements, which...
But even with operating,
Yeah.
even with capital,
Yeah.
okay, take pensions out of there, because, I think pensions are a whole...
That's a whole other mess by
whole different
itself.
ballgame.
Yeah.
That's where, and I tend to agree with Tom's thinking that I think he's wanting us to spend within our means. And I think with that pension, we've got a contractual obligation. We're basing on actual assumptions. So that part of finance, I felt pretty comfortable that you have to do the math right. You're kidding yourself if you're going to say over the next 20 years, I'm going to get a rate of return that's higher than what any professional in the industry would recommend. So that, but as far as spending faster than growing revenue, I couldn't support that. I think for any of us at home, you wouldn't do that. You couldn't do that without running up debt that couldn't be repaid. That was the same thing we talked about with pensions. You pay as you go, or you end up with a bigger bill in the future. So I guess I was kind of thinking that when it comes to the 5-year plan, I sure like the idea of push the organic growth. You know, you get the EAV up, that's some great news, and get some more businesses open. And you know, watching the construction at First and Lincoln Highway, new stuff. Those are the things to push and grow the revenue, so the expenses could follow. And
to your point on some of that, you need to put more in the front end to get the development and growth. So there's going to be more mechanisms. You know, you need to look at kind of how your tax base is and where you want to focus that base, whether it's through, you know, new taxes or fees, something that will help then spur that development as well. So there's kind of the, you know, put money in the front to get a better return on the end.
Well, and here's the other thing that is, you know, this is a case where the argument sounds real good until you put it to paper, okay? Right now, we're sitting, and we've been sitting for several years with what I would call a liability for vehicle replacement and streets that are going to get to the point where we have a point of no return. With respect to the streets, the point of no return is that we have to reconstruct from the base all of the streets. Okay, so the question,
deferred maintenance building up.
The question I would ask, even though it is quite a reasonable theory, we've got to produce $6 to $7 million in additional revenue a year. Okay? You can't produce that by cuts. Okay? I mean, the cuts have been pretty deep in some years, and those have been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay? Where are you going to come up with revenue growth of $6 million to $7 million? And if, you know, right now we have a situation where our economy in DeKalb has reliance on transportation. Yeah. And so,
and logistics.
Transportation and logistics. And at some point, if those roads continue to get worse, and the fact that we have transportation and logistics makes it so that they're harder on our roads, we're going to get to the point that we're no longer an attractive community. And so there are some difficult choices that have to be made. And the question is, you know, in an emergency, even as an individual, you will borrow and pay back over time something that has a value that extends beyond the life over which you're borrowing. So streets, you know, the core street, depending on the materials that are used, you know, can be 15 to 30 years. Well, the packages that we've been looking at say just to keep us where we're at, we need $7 million a year over 5 or 6 years. Well, what we might have to do to make that palatable in terms of the amount of revenue that we have to generate for debt service, and you're right, Dave, that, you know, we got to have a way to pay that debt service. We may have to borrow for a period that is closer to the economic life than it is of the short-term investments that we need to make in that capital. I'm not prepared, and I probably won't be prepared next week to be able to have a substantive discussion of the revenue choices that are out there for the debt service. I mean, I only feel strongly about one of them. And the one that I feel strongly about is the vehicle sticker. But you know, we can't tax people into submission. I understand that. But if you don't have good schools, if you don't have good roads, if you don't have good water, you don't have good sewer, I'm talking capital.
Oh, okay.
Right now, but yes, you're right. And good public services. Absolutely. You're not going to be able to grow. And
Or if you don't have good perception.
right.
I mean, let's compare Sycamore and DeKalb. Perception is, whether we like it or not, Sycamore School is the one where people want to go to, and I hear it all the time. People say, you don't want to go to DeKalb, you want to go to Sycamore. I think it's a myth. However, unfortunately, it's become the perception. And if you look at housing starts, we're averaging what, 4 in the last few years a year? They're averaging like 40. You know what I mean? It's like, although interestingly, our school population has increased slightly, theirs has gone down slightly. But
And they're running deficits too.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just saying, it's never that simple. It'd be easy if we could just say we need to cut. Unfortunately, that usually isn't the answer, because then last time we met, I looked up some stuff in cities that have gone into that austerity track. Just like you're saying, the roads decrease. Look at malls where they don't take care of their parking lots, and tenants start moving out, or they won't go in because they don't want. People don't want to shop there.
Well, all you have to do, okay, is look at St. Charles.
Oh,
okay?
wow.
They've got 2 malls
Yep.
that have essentially gone under.
Yep.
One, that there's nothing there, partially because of covenants on the land, and the other one that's going through.
The big or the anchors, right? Where you know about Bergman's.
Yeah, right. That that was. I won't say it's on its last legs, because that's a valuable piece of property, and so that you can redo.
Yeah, they'll do something.
But it's one of these things where the grass is always greener on the other side of the the fence, but it isn't always greener on the other side of the fence.
Right.
And one of the things that we have, and I'm glad you put it this way, Ron, is that we have a disconnect between perception and reality. And I was really bothered by some of the things that were being reported. And I don't, you take things that are being reported with a bit of a grain of salt. And Chief, you might be a useful sounding board on this. With respect to the North Annie Glidden, what was being reported was that there were people, and they were identified in various categories, who were saying that the problem in North Annie Glidden is that we have families moving in, replacing students, and families are violent. I was like, what? And that was reported, that because families were replacing students, it was becoming a more violent place.
I can tell you, the chief and I were both at the task force meeting, and that was not said there.
Okay, well.
Patty was at the community meeting, so it's.
I know he's talking about social media picks that stuff up, and people are arguing.
Well, this was actually reported it was reported that they are media sources. Both the Daily Chronicle and the Northern Star had quotes from people that were making that claim. So whether it was said or not, some of it was students felt that families were encroaching upon their territory. And basically what the point was is that there's been a vacuum created with fewer students around. And that vacuum is being filled in by low-income people who are coming in and bringing all their problems from outside. And if we just had more students, we'd have less violence in the community.
And there are actually sometimes families who just want a better place for their children to grow
Correct.
up.
They come out here because they want a better life.
Right.
And we cry about not getting them out from Chicago. Well, you know what? A lot of them aren't coming anymore. Now Kish is down, Northern's down. People are, I mean, really, it's, you got, whatever, 7,000 less students than we had 10 years ago. And that's 7,000 people not buying groceries and entertainment and liquor and...
Well, you know, and it, you know, to some extent, it's it's a function of some good things at the university too.
Yes.
In the sense that the last I heard, I know this was true last year, there were no spaces in the residence halls. The residence halls are full up. But there are fewer spaces in the residence halls because there's more. No, well, they close out, but also as compared with when we went to school.
No,
did you live in a residence hall?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in some years you were lucky if you had a bed in the study hall because there was so much of an
and there was less square feet per student.
Yes.
That was,
yes.
You know, so now, you know, where there might have been 3 rooms before, there's 2 rooms.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, colleges and universities, including Northern, have done a much, much better job of food service and the food opportunities, and the students are spending their money in the food plans and not needing necessarily to blow off the money that they spend on their board. Oh, and also there's more flexibility.
There's more
when I went to college, you had to buy 20. You know, you had to buy 20.
Yeah, flex hours.
meals.
You have subways and some of the. I mean,
Yeah.
they've gotten a lot smarter on how they're appealing to students. More options for them to buy
Right.
food. You know, to get. We got excited with the hamburger bar. Now they have Asian food and.
May I come back to the 5-year plan?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, thank you. I wanted to compliment you because I have some inkling of how hard this is when you're doing comparables. And I went through that stuff pretty well, I thought, and I was very appreciative of whoever came up with the comparable cities and the criteria you used, and good, pat on back, whoever did that, whatever group of people. Well, that's a tough road to hold, man.
I can give you the history on the comparables. Goes back to 2015 when we did the pay and compensation study.
Yeah.
And we contracted out that to Sickage. And so this was based on scientific criteria, based on a 40-mile radius, and looking at all of that.
And if they had a fire department and yada, yada, yada. Yeah.
But we also, and I think you missed it when we talked about the last meeting, Lynn, is that this probably, we had at least 10 different employees working on this with Jeff. We couldn't have done this without Blairta and Walker, 2 of our NPA interns. Cumulatively, of all the staff that we had spending on this, this was over 500 hours of work to get to this point on this document. We wanted to give you a general sense because we want you to know how much time and effort went into this and how serious we were trying to present the best plan to you as the committee and to the community.
I get it. I've done some of this stuff before in different areas, but I appreciate this. That's why I want to say something and give you a compliment.
Thank you.
And I have to say, you know, anytime you do this sort of thing, you can be nitpicked. I can just tell you, you know, I think that there's still always room for improvement.
Absolutely.
But I will say that I think that what was produced exceeded what I expected in the first go around. Part of that is.
May I say one more thing?
Sure.
And I really appreciated how at times you segregated it down to the university towns. That was very helpful.
And we'll continue to do that because we think it's important to have the base comparable communities, which when you look at the economic data, whether they're close to us or further away, but when you look at their property tax levy, general fund, all those criteria, they most closely resemble DeKalb. And of those municipalities, the one that is the closest comparable to us is Carpentersville.
That just knocked my socks off.
Yeah. When you look at the data, and I don't want to be remiss to make sure that I publicly thank once again Jeff's talents and amount of time that he put into putting together this plan for us and everything that he's done for us in the past 6 months. So thank you, Jeff.
You know, it's really kind of shocking, and this is a perception thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's like people talking about Rockford or talking about what was the other example that I was going to use? Well, DeKalb is a little bit an example, but you know, I went to high school in Carpentersville, and the community has completely changed. I mean, depending on which side of the river you're on, I mean, it is majority Latino, overwhelmingly Latino in some areas of Carpentersville, and then it's reasonably high income, pretty much not Hispanic, you know, on the west side of the river.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, it's more like an Algonquin or a Lake in the Hills or Huntley. So.
A bunch of my students that graduated within the last 15 years married, started families, and live there.
Well, and I grew up in West Dundee, which now the housing values are. Anyway.
I want to thank you too. You did a wonderful job. When I brought up normal, it was just thinking in terms of, and I'll say it again, I've said it before, I know people have issue with it. I think if we're going to compare any community, it should be normal Illinois, because if you go down there and look, rather than going to other cities and other states, if they want to look at how you made a communiversity, I will tell you from when I was there in the 70s to today, they've done it in the building, and they built that controversial large hotel on the campus. And you know what, Mike, it's 100% occupancy, and they've added a second one. They've now built a Hilton right across the street from it.
I want you to know I was the lead expert witness against that hotel. So.
I remember you.
How do you know that?
Well,
It won't start calling you Snidely Middle-Ash.
No, when you run into every case that I've had that actually went to trial involved eminent domain. Okay? And I was representing some people whose property was taken by eminent domain. And some of their property was taken by eminent domain to give it to one of the banks. And the city changed their tune, or the town.
Yeah, I don't know the mechanics of all that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was one of these things where, you know, imagine that you had somebody like John Pappas or Tom Rosenau.
Yes.
Okay? And they come in and they take almost all the guy's property in the downtown area and call it, you know.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there were reasons to challenge it. The lawyers on my side did a very poor job, but and Normal got a summary judgment. They didn't even have to try the case. But.
So can I add then, if I look at, so as you know that and I'm looking in the 5-year plan, the 13 comparable communities are based upon the criteria that was established in the pay and comp study.
Yep.
Are there any other university communities that you would like added in future revisions of this plan?
No, I'm not suggesting you don't do what you did. I would suggest we also look west sometimes. We're an exurb, and we're always looking east. And I have an issue when we look at a city in DuPage County, which is the richest county in the country, or one of the richest. I mean, if you want to get into specifics,
No,
I know some of this stuff because we talk about a lot of anecdotal, and I went and looked up some data, and it's against the backdrop. We have to do what we have to do, but the reality is we say we're perceived as being such a highly taxed county. We rank out of 3,180. Where was that? Out of 3,200 counties.
You mean nationally?
Nationally. We are up there. We're like in the top 40. You know what I mean? So it's like perception is reality. There's taxes. Well, no, they take out all taxes. They look at because you can't. I agree. You can't compare Illinois to Texas because Texas doesn't have an income tax.
No, that's not what I mean. What I'm saying is that if you take one of the things that they do is they do the tax rate per capita sometimes.
Yeah, per capita versus medium versus household income. I'm just saying there's some realities with that.
Sure.
Ownership in this city is down a little over 1%. Average home in this county has 2 cars. 25% have 3. So we're looking at like fuel tax and stuff. That's relevant to me information. DeKalb County is number 20 out of 101 counties in this state in population. So that's substantial. But however, we have more in common with Kendall County than we do in DuPage. Kendall County has the same population. Their property values dropped a third when the bubble started. So you're talking about benchmark years. I would be looking at the year. One of the examples would be like, was it 08 before everyone?
They actually used it at this national conference. They used Kendall County is an example of a bankrupt.
Yes, and a lot of speculative growth because people were willing to drive 50 minutes because you got more money for the buck. So as we look at this stuff, the city council should be looking at. You now have less money when the economy tanked. Suddenly gas went to $4. People weren't willing to come out here anymore and spend that kind of money. And some of our growth, I think, was speculative too, at least the commercial part of it. I just think here's the facts. I'm not using it to argue for it.
No.
As far as communities, I would look at a few, maybe west of here. I realize we have the most in common with, but DeKalb is totally unique because we rested for years on the Chicago filling it, and now the university's discovered that they're getting more creative in marketing and some of that. I just think we also need to spend equal time. What makes DeKalb different?
But see, Ron, the problem is, okay, and this is why this group of communities looks like it does. Okay, everything you've said is true, but in terms of the labor market is everything east of us. People do that.
Correct.
We don't compete with Dixon for workers, for high-skilled workers.
No, I agree with you.
Okay, so...
But they're different communities, and I agree, we're a university town, so it'd be kind of silly to convert. But I think there's something to be said when you're looking at property raised taxes.
I
think
agree.
that's where we have something relevant with Dixon or Sterling versus Carroll Stream,
right.
Or Carpentersville. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And this is, I just want to bring us back because you're absolutely right. And what we have is a compromise here.
Yeah.
Okay. Because one of the things that we talked about, and this was one of the issues that led us to have some challenges with respect to getting off the starting block with respect to the strategic financial plan.
Yeah.
One of the discussions that we had was on this very topic, that for compensation you have one set of communities, but those communities may not be the best comparisons for things like property values,
yes.
etc. And so we added the college towns, but there was a decision made that we'll start with this, and we need to consider how we can potentially add some communities in. Now, a lot of people, well, actually, it's not as far-fetched as it sounds. You can't take things in isolation either in terms of our property taxes. What you would need to do, and this is one of the problems, Dave, you and I were talking about this. This is part of the problem with people coming out here to appraise property who don't know this particular market.
Correct.
Okay? And so, okay, I pay X number of dollars, which is very high on a home that is valued what my home is valued. But what is my total cost of ownership for a home that is comparable to one in the suburbs? And I would suspect that even if I'm paying a higher rate on my property taxes, that my total cost of ownership is probably still lower than it is in the suburbs, as long as I'm working local. If I'm commuting, then we have.
No, I'm total agreement with you.
So we need
I
to
don't
find a way
always
to
look at it that way, or unless they're invested in a community. You know what I'm saying? So I think you all did everything well and right, and I'm just suggesting maybe a little more diversity. I would maybe take Charleston out of the mix, because frankly, between you and I think that is probably going to be the one that won't make it. But
right, Charleston,
just too bad.
And I wouldn't put Macomb in.
No, I don't know that I would either, because again, each community is different. I mean, Macomb is the crossroads of the state.
Charleston, you can make more of an argument because it's close to an interstate.
Yeah.
And you are going to potentially get people.
No, I'm not diminishing, or I don't want you to feel that at all. I think I kind of know life when I said they get an assignment, they go and they do a wonderful job on it, and then there's more questions raised, they go back and they do it. So I said I would probably be not as pleasant the third time I was asked to, but you all do a great job, so I didn't want to.
So let me ask a question to get us back to the question that the city manager asked about, and try to provide some guidance. Okay, in future years, when will the report from Foster & Foster be produced? Will it still be?
Will it still be September?
No, in your packet, for last packet, it actually had the dates, and so let me.
The one from the 21st.
Yeah, they were. I thought it was in June.
It was early summer.
Yeah.
See, I'm thinking that our goal should be July with respect to the strategic financial plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think that was what, close to what our goal was. If it slides a half a month, that's fine. But we want the strategic financial plan, the update, to inform the budget process for the next fiscal year.
Yes.
And so you want to have time to be able to say, do our priorities change in any way based upon the information that we have received that's changed since the previous plan? That doesn't mean that we start having weekly meetings in July, but we use that as a benchmark to then create the August meeting, which I think was probably pretty close to where we needed to be in terms of setting the foundation for the budget process.
Yeah.
The other thing that I should say, okay, and is that the plan right now is, the plan right now is that we're going to meet according to the schedule that is there. There is no plan at this time to have joint meetings with the city council.
None?
That is going to be the suggestion. And
I would approve of that. I think for
That
the
we
past,
don't.
all we ever did was mutual meetings. I never felt like we met as a committee itself with
Well,
the.
before you joined the committee, we did have independent meetings.
Did you see? I
very-
didn't
very
see
few.
it.
But some,
Very
I wish
few.
we had had more.
But the goal then, though, is that we will have formal recommendations, which we did tonight, that we'll have recommendations that will be prepared, as the one tonight for option 3 will be prepared, and then there will be a staff cover memo, and then the city council can focus on that. Now, that needs to be brought to the city council, as I think I understand. So the city council has an opportunity to react to that. I'm not throwing anybody above the bus or under the bus. But Molly's experience in other communities is that the groups met independently, and we developed, everybody said that the council was influencing the process too much and that we needed to meet more. I have a feeling that ultimately there may be some more balance in the process, but the city council, and this is something that, I guess not everybody's seen this. The city council will have a week's worth of budget meetings on their own, or 3 days. I think it's November 4th through the 6th, somewhere in there.
We've got to schedule the specific dates. We've been most focused on getting the FAC dates scheduled, so that's going to be the next
Right.
thing, is to schedule the council.
Right. So we'll see how that all shakes out. There are arguments on both sides, but I think that we did probably, and this is my personal opinion, and I did not express this, I was not responsible for leading the charge on this, but I think we got into some protracted arguments in those meetings that resulted in no progress being made by either body in terms of meeting their responsibilities, either in terms of advice or in terms of making decisions. Now, if the council wants to have a joint meeting or wants to have a representative available for asking questions, we can certainly do that. But if you have strong feelings about it, this is our first, of the 4 scheduled meetings. So, think about it, and we can discuss it further.
I would just add, I think if the council did request a joint meeting, I think it'd be, well, if they go in that direction, I think it's most beneficial after you've gone through and made all your recommendations in regards to the budget, because it allows you the opportunity to do your work independently as
Yes.
a committee, make that recommendation,
Yes.
and then present it to the council.
Well, and I think tonight was a good example of that. And other members may have a different opinion than I, and I respect that. But the discussion that we had on the property tax levy tonight was a professional discussion based on what we felt was the most financially sound recommendation. It is not our role to make the political decisions.
That's correct.
And so sometimes we, I think, have to be responsible for making the recommendations that we believe are the soundest financial recommendations, and then allow the council
And then they are the politically, I mean, it's reality, because they're up for a re-election, so they're going to make a more subjective, ours should be more, wait a minute, yeah, ours should be more objective.
You know, I would encourage them to have
Because
courage in the process.
Frankly, yeah, I'm facing angry voters, and I'm going to have to weigh that. You know what I mean? We don't have that on our shoulders, so certainly we have the worry of the city.
Well, I get plenty of angry
I'll bet you do.
citizens
I'll bet
who
you do.
correspond with me.
Yes, you do.
Yes,
I get people who stop me in the jewel.
I do too.
Yeah.
There are people that I don't know who, you know,
Yeah, aren't you?
most of the time it's relatively positive because they know that we do get
Look,
crap from people.
I sure like what you're talking about for next year, getting the strategic planning should come first. I feel uncomfortable having to do this levy recommendation without having the plan, but we've got a deadline on levy numbers being done. But that's...
Well, we have more than we've ever had here. It's not complete though. You're absolutely right. And what we may need to do, and I'm glad you said that, Dave, is we may need to have a debriefing kind of meeting, January, February, to say, okay, here's how the budget process went. Now, looking at this strategic financial plan, okay, how did the strategic financial plan, how is it used in the process, and how did what the plan said influence any decisions that were made?
You know, you read the first part of this 5-year plan and you think the last thing in the world we should do is increase the tax levy a penny, because there's so much written in the front of this document about how adversely impacted our community is because of our tax rate. So there's that conflict in there, but then we go to the math of that, and we got to focus on the pension issue separately. But I had a few thoughts on that 5-year plan, if I could.
Sure.
I'm just thinking, one thing that would help me, and maybe it's just because I'm a finance guy, but the bonds, I get kind of lost in wondering, what did the money get used for? I know we've got them all identified as far as their series, such and such, but and the bar chart showing when things are going to get paid off and looking at the debt service coverage is something that I'm interested in. I kind of wish I knew what was the money actually used for, and if it was to refund a different bond, well, what was the original, what did we put that cash out for? Because I think it goes to your point about making investments. We should have a return on the investment, and I don't know how hard it is to get that purpose out. I started to look through some of the old annual reports to see if I could find it.
Well, we know that some of it's the police department. Okay, so, but we can answer that question, and I think because we've refunded a lot of them, I think that's a great question.
It is.
We could,
It has to be listed when you do your bond issuance. You have to, I can't think of the name of the paperwork you have to turn in, and in there, you have to spell it, like what projects is it used for and what things underneath it, so we should be able to find that.
yeah, when I would analyze a municipality financially, that would be, you know, where'd the money go? And the other kind of principle that I was hoping we could stay with too is the idea that the 25% or the 90-day reserve fund balance, it seems to get twisted a little bit in some conversations. As if we were encourage anyone to have 3 to 6 months of savings, so that when something breaks, it's an inconvenience, not a crisis.
Right.
But we need to have that so that when the crisis comes, hopefully it never will come, but you know, I'm sure the folks in Las Vegas never expected a crisis like they're dealing with. So something happens, and you can write the checks, pay the bills, at least to a certain extent. And I think protecting that over the course of a strategic plan is really important. Anything that diminishes that, I think is, well, we shouldn't go that path, in my opinion.
There's actually a literature out there now that the fund balance and adhering to that policy is the #1 explanatory variable in the governments who survive. So that's another great.
And we don't want to dip into that to fix a street that should be
Right.
fixed under a maintenance plan, or to buy a replacement truck. And I don't know if the number of dump trucks we have is twice as many as we need or half as many, but that's for other folks to figure out. But it should be the emergency, the reserve fund, just as we hopefully all should have some emergency fund so that emergencies or inconveniences and not crises that force us then to borrow money for stuff that you shouldn't be borrowing money for. Hope that would happen. With the comparables, I'm sorry to jump around, but one thought, I just wonder if the folks that do the statistics can find that magical comparison. I was looking at the demographics on page 15, and some of the data is a little bit old. Later in the report, for example, we've got the median value of home and 154, and later we talk about in 2017, the median price is 131,000. Retail sales per capita, you know, is that like the magic number to compare us to other college towns or other towns? I just wonder what, if somebody in municipal finance knows what the ratios are that tell the good story.
Well, remember that the housing one, those are two different numbers. And what I mean by that
median value
is the 134 is the average sale price or the median sales price.
Right.
And the 154 is the median housing value.
Right, it is, right. So that's an indication then of direction perhaps, or what's going on in the market. But, you know, a number by itself, comparing one town to another, but a ratio, I think, is much more powerful. Just so you got to get the right ones. And, if our median household income or income per capita is way below our comparable towns, then how do we grow our economic engine with those sets of resources?
Well, one of the things that we need to, you know, we need to dig into the numbers a little bit. You know, one of the things that we're going to want to know is the dominance of the university community within these cities. So how much of our median income is driven by student families versus a community like Champaign-Urbana or something like that?
You know what we did on our bond ratings, like when we go through the rating reviews, we'd show everything as the city as a whole, and we would make a point of showing median income minus the student population.
That's what we need to try to look for.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going, Dave. You're doing great.
No, I was just looking for some numbers to help. Pardon?
It is 7 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got a little flexibility there, so I was checking messages off. So that was just kind of where, and because I think we've got to grow the revenue, I hope, without increasing the rates of fees and taxes on people, but by economic growth. And I'm not sure where the right comparisons are, but.
You know, there is, I will just, I'll do this more at 11 T's. There's a revenue source that was discussed with me by Mr. Holdeman after the last meeting that I don't think is in here, and it will be interesting if it's brought forward. It's something that is creative. It's something that is directly tied to a municipal service, and it's not something that people would say, "Oh, come on, you're just nickeling and diming." So,
Well, come on.
stormwater, stormwater sewers.
You're going to see that next year, that we will be looking at that, because we need to analyze stormwater.
We have no revenue source to go towards stormwater sewers because they're not. Okay, they're ours,
Yeah.
as opposed to the sanitary district.
That's right.
And so,
And sanitary sewers and storm sewers are two different
right,
animals.
exactly. And so, and we have issues of flooding in some areas. So we, you know, stormwater management is.
So what you're going to see in the fiscal year 18 budget is, if you think of what Tim has presented that's part of the 5-year plan, the asset management plan on streets and fleet was phase 1. Phase 2 is,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
is
Yeah.
facilities, and Phase 3, actually, we have funding to start facilities this fiscal year and carry over into next fiscal year, so you'll be seeing that next year. And we're recommending in fiscal year 18 to budget for Phase 3, which is stormwater.
And the reason it came up is there was actually the stormwater sewer collapsed in front of my house. It's small collapse. And I said, well, where does that come from? And he said, well, we don't have a revenue source for that.
Yep.
We just pay for it.
But it could help development too. It's one of
Yeah.
the things Champaign added stormwater utility fee and has managed to turn water detention basins into features and parks for people to come to.
Sure.
So you could, try to build that development by adding 10 points of interest with that.
I know places that have put their soccer fields in detention ponds. Not detention areas, not
Areas.
detention ponds.
Like down there on the corner of Glidden and Taylor, that big open field, well, it's park, a lot of it's park, yeah.
Jim?
Yep, thank you.
Stan?
No, we're here to answer any questions. Just thank you very much for the feedback, and this is
Yeah.
Jeff's last meeting, so once again, thanks to Jeff.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
Congratulations. Should have done pizza today.
No, thanks for letting me,
Yeah,
Sorry, guys.
I need a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Yay, team.
All right.